Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, Derek Brown from FantasyPros is going to join us. Now, I've said this before. I don't play a ton of fantasy, right? But he's a pro. I'm going to be the amateur, and I'm going to ask him, I think, pretty heady questions. And he'll take me to school. So before we have Derek Brown of FantasyPros, who are just so good at what they do, I want you to go and download the Game Time app. 90 seconds. Code Colin. That'll always get you $20 off your first purchase. Nobody gets you better seats at better prices for live events than Game Time. Also, ticket prices go down the closer you get to the first pitch or to kickoff. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. You download the app, you create an account, you put in the code Colin, that's me, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It's lowest prices guaranteed on last-minute deals. College football, NFL, Major League Baseball. You don't have your mind made up days in advance for all these. Game Time. Code Colin, $20 off. Well, we felt very lucky when we were able to make FantasyPros part of the volume. They have more than delivered for us. Really sharp guys. And we did some pre-draft stuff. And Derek DBro Brown is a senior analyst for FantasyPros, and he released his top 150 fantasy players earlier this month. So I've said this before. My first job out of college was Vegas. So I started gambling before I played fantasy football, although I've always known, years and years ago, Derek, I was doing a live remote show when I worked at ESPN in Austin. And it was a real epiphany for me. I said, how many of you guys bet football? Like bet. And like 4 guys raised their hand. I said, how many play fantasy? The whole room went up. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm not as popular. I know I'm in my social group. But I can also admit it's a huge business. When I first heard you guys about a year and a half ago, we were like, that's the guys to get. They really know what they're doing. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to start this. And I'm going to be a complete novice on this. I mean, I know fantasy, I get it. But for me, we all know the top 6 to 8 to 10 quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Give me a quarterback for the guy that bets or doesn't play fantasy, the 4 of us on the planet, but appreciate it, that you would think would be a top pick, but doesn't in fantasy deliver, and explain it to our audience in the simplest terms.
Well, a guy that I've been high on since the pre-draft process, Colin, and I think that he has huge upside this year is Jayden Daniels. And I've talked about him since the NFL draft, since prospect season, and I think that he is going to crush this year. And a lot of this, and we talked about it in fantasy, is that the rushing equity that it plays up so much in scoring and how that goes. But there are other parts and pieces to love here. And whether we're going to talk about Cliff Kingsbury and an up-pace offense and play volume. Yes. And for fantasy, it's always the moniker is always thrown out there. Volume is king, but that goes back to play volume. We need play volume to get targets, to get pass attempts, to get all these things that score fantasy points. And I think Jayden Daniels, not only is it the rushing, but we're going to get the play volume, and people vastly underrate him as a passer. I mean, the guy was in the Heisman. I mean, he won the Heisman because he is not only a good rusher of the football, but right. Regardless of whatever metric you pull up, he was also one of the best passers in the nation, and I think that crosses over to the NFL.
Well, I think he's a better passer at this stage in his career than Lamar Jackson was. I don't think he's quite as dynamic, but I watched him at Arizona State as a true freshman because I knew Herm Edwards, and I was a Pac-12 guy, and he weighed about $160 wet. And I watched him, and his helmet looked like it might as well have been it was like a giant pumpkin on this little stick figure because he was so skinny. And I'm watching him, I'm like, this dude's like 18, and he's really, really talented. And then all of a sudden he goes to LSU, and I remember saying on the air, you guys, he's with their talent, like Arizona State had one running back I liked. I'm like, does everybody understand this? And there was a lot of pushback, and I think now everybody goes, wow, he's a pretty special kid. He's also kind of a workaholic and a film junkie, which goes a long way. Is there In baseball, there's the contract year guys, right? Like that's a real thing in baseball is guys on contract years. We don't talk about it a lot in football because the truth is, if you're not playing hard and focused, hockey and football, you get hurt. There is no load management. You play hurt, you play injured, you play hard every night. But are there situationally in fantasy, is there maybe a quarterback this year that you look, it's a new coordinator. It is a big year for him financially. It's a bounce back year. Is there a quarterback to you that you're like, you know what? This is a little bit of a steal in fantasy if things go right.
I think there's a few guys that fit the mold of being a steal this year, and I think there's a lot of ways that we could go with this, Colin. Like whether it's guys that just got contracts or guys that are trying to prove they deserve the money. And the two guys that stand out to me that just already got paid, but really we're talking about, okay, how have their NFL careers panned out to this point and justifying the big money contracts they both just got. And that's Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence. And I think both of these guys, and with Love, I mean, it was a tale of two seasons. We all know that. But down the stretch after week 12, I mean, he was electric, like playing elite level football. And for a player that you can wait, and this is much of, again, fantasy, we talk about like you can wait on quarterbacks to the later rounds.
Throw another shrimp on the Barbie. Get in on UFC 305 live from the land down under. This is going to be fun at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. The middleweight title is on the line for the main event. You know, I go to UFC cards 4 or 5 live every year, especially in the summer. And in the fall, I buy them. The card is stacked full of, as it says here, blokes and Sheilas. Speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, sign up, go to the app. It's real simple. Put in the code Colin, COLIN. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. UFC is so much fun to watch. Just incredible intensity. Put $5-10 on the line. All right, the code is Colin. New customers, $150. You get it instantly, betting just $5. Okay, UFC 305, middleweight title on the line, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
No, but with Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence, it really comes down to they both got paid, and now they have to justify these massive contracts. But I think both of them are going to do that this season. I mean, Jordan Love, we saw last year, he was playing elite level football down the stretch. And I think that crosses over into this year. Second year being the starter, getting more reps, still an elite level, or well, not elite level, but really, really good weapons around him. And we know LaFleur is going to scheme it up. But Trevor Lawrence, I mean, with all the Urban Meyer stuff, and we still haven't seen the best season out of him yet. But last year, QB 13 in fantasy points per game, but QB 7 in expected fantasy points per game. They've done nothing but add weapons around him this year, Colin. And I think we see the best season yet out of Trevor Lawrence in 2024.
How do I look at Justin Herbert? So they draft a very clever, smaller receiver, but a speedy second-round guy out of Georgia. But they're not great on the perimeter. Clearly, the Joel Alt pick and the running back acquisitions, this is going to be power football. I think Justin Herbert will win more, but I'm not sure stats-wise he's going to be, like, how would you judge him? Because I see Harbaugh's teams. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's fantasy is basically Justin Herbert just throws on 3rd and 2 and 2nd and 4 on play action, and it's a power run game. I mean, we just watched J.J. McCarthy rarely throw infrequently in big games. So how do you look from your perspective at Justin Herbert this year?
I've had to drop him in my rankings a little bit, Colin. And like I kept the hope candle lit for him this year only because we know that Herbert's always, I mean, going back to Oregon, he's a hyper athletic quarterback. So like we haven't seen the rushing side for him be unlocked in the NFL, although I think that he could add that to his game. But I bumped him down because now it's not only the passing volume and he has to overcome that with efficiency this year. Maybe he could do it, maybe he can't. But now with the foot issue and the fascia, like, now I'm like, okay, well, if he's not going to run for much, now I've got to drop him a little bit further in my ranks. Like right now, he's my QB 19. I've got him living in the same neighborhood or area code as Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, and the new starter for the Vikings. And we just talked about the Vikings a little bit, Sam Darnold. So yeah, I'm much lower on Herbert than maybe consensus.
You know, when I look at a player like Jalen Hurts, he's had one great year and it was tied to Shane Steichen. And I think to myself, now reports come out that Nick Sirianni, there was a bit of a gap in communication between Sirianni, who I was always told when he got the job was a bit over his head. He wasn't quite ready to be a head coach, especially in relentless Philadelphia, where there's just pressure. It's like the loudest sports town in the country. And so I look at Jalen Hurts and I'm like, I think I like him, but there's injuries. He's had one great year. I'm not sure the head coach is going to survive. I don't, in the world of now, I think he's a top 10 quarterback, but where do you put him on your list?
Ooh, this could be a good conversation for us because he's actually my QB1 this year. And I think
Wow.
I love him this year. And I know I was wondering if we were going to bring him up and talk about him because I know I've heard you on the airwaves and I know you got concerns about the Eagles. And I think bringing Kellen Moore into this offense in this room is going to absolutely change the complexion. I'm not saying that he's the same level of designer, and it didn't go well for the Chargers, but it did go well in Dallas as Shane Steichen because I think Shane is one of the best play callers and play designers in the NFL.
He really is.
He is, and that's another reason why I'm very high on Anthony Richardson this year. But with Hurts, I think we get a version of the Philadelphia Eagles offense because look, I'm not going to come on here and disparage anybody, but like Brian Johnson, it was a struggle all last year.
He was over his skis. Yeah,
he was way in over his head. I mean, they ran and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I feel like they ran a vanilla version of Steichen's offense last year, and it was very much like you saw the ebbs and flows, like. Whenever they were able to hit big plays, go routes down the field, it was very spotty. And they would have 2 or 3 big plays and then go into the cave for a while and then 2 or 3 big plays. And that was it. And I think this year we're going to get Kellen Moore infusing like more play action, motion, things that are sharp and that people should be doing with play calling. But I think that plus the play going back to play volume, I think we get a high paced offense. And for the first time in Philly this year, we might get an offense for not only do the Eagles finish top 5 or top 10 in neutral pace, but what could unlock the other level for Hurts because we haven't seen passing volume out of this offense. We've seen lots of plays. We've seen rushing, and everybody's worried about do they run with Hurts at the goal line this year? I'm kind of on the spot where I think his rushing touchdowns obviously come back some because he was historic last year, but he compensates with a better passing offense, and they have the weapons to do it. So I think it's wheels up for Jalen Hurts and the Philly offense this year. Even if Sirianni is maybe not the best head coach, I think Kellen's going to bring some of the best elements out of this passing game too.
One of the reasons I defended Jahmyr Gibbs going to Detroit, because I still do believe you can draft kickers. They can be the leading scorer in a team. If you like a kicker, Rams just drafted one I think, was it Stanford? Draft a kicker. I think you can draft running backs in the first round. I thought Bijan Robinson was underused considerably in Atlanta. So I think he's real. I thought he was LaDainian Tomlinson too. There was literally no hole. Leadership, no fumbles, hard runner, can catch, block, just everything. Almost a flawless player. I don't expect number one, but Saquon Barkley, he was a game breaker. Ezekiel Elliott. One of the reasons I back Jahmyr Gibbs is because the Lions O-line is so good. They feel like Dallas about 7 years ago. Like there's no argument that's the best O-line. That was the way it was with Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, Frederick. We were just like, okay, who's number 2? It's Larry Bird at the 3-point shooting contest. Who's shooting for second? And I kind of feel like the Lions have separated from other good lines. So you're virtually guaranteed excellent production out of Jahmyr Gibbs. And I look at him and I think Saquon Barkley will do this. There are a lot of guys. I think Bijan will get more carries in Atlanta. To me, Jahmyr Gibbs with that O-line, I look at it and what is considered to be a really sharp offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. I look at him as a running back and I'm like, that can't fail. Like, where do you have him ranked?
I've got him behind the big 3 that are going in the first round of draft. So Bijan Robinson's my RB1. Then I got McCaffrey, Breece Hall, but I've got Gibbs at the top of my tier 2 at RB4. And it's a little bit above consensus because most people have Saquon and Jonathan Taylor there, but I'm with you, Colin. Like I love Gibbs this year. And I think I think people are kind of pushed off a little bit of Gibbs in certain instances because it's a committee backfield and they look at it like, well, David Montgomery's still going to get run this year. Like he's not
Right.
going away. And I'm like, I know he's not going away, but you look at what Gibbs did in his first season. The efficiency was awesome. He was great, whether we're talking about on a rushing aspect or in the passing game. But what people fail to realize is in weeks 10 through 18, after Montgomery came back, well, like the red zone usage was pretty similar as far as on a per touch basis. Gibbs dominated the red zone snaps. Like he had almost 64% of the red zone snaps. So if the volume at that part of the field comes into play even more this year, and it's not David Montgomery running it in at the 5 or the 3 or the 10, and it's Gibbs getting rushing attempts, getting targets in that type of red zone area, then I think Gibbs has an easy chance to be a top 3, heck, maybe the RB1 overall. And I don't think that's insane, but it can happen.
So I think Christian McCaffrey is the second best running back of my life to Walter Payton. I think his dexterity as a pass catcher puts him an inch above Barry Sanders, but all three are just different. They're just different level players.
Agreed.
And I think Adrian Peterson, although he had a fumble issue and I didn't trust him catching the ball, may be more explosive than all of them outside of maybe Walter Payton. But I do worry about now back-to-back years. McCaffrey's up in the 300 touches. The last time that happened, he was hurt the following year. He is I've seen him in person a couple of times in the last year, and my wife even remarks, he doesn't look like a football player. Like it's amazing. Like he must have zero body fat. He's so powerful. But I look at it and I think to myself, okay, Brock Purdy, Trent Williams is not in camp. They're going to use McCaffrey heavy here. You're not going to put Brock Purdy, who's an undersized quarterback, with a backup left tackle on an O-line I don't love. Also, Trent Williams is really the foundational piece up front for them. Like, and I look at McCaffrey, I'm not saying a down year, but I could see, if not injury, a fatigue factor, a no Trent Williams. Even if Trent comes in, he's older. He may not be being Trent till October. Where are you on McCaffrey today?
Well, I'm glad we talked about him because I don't want to say it's controversial, but the fact that I don't have him as my RB1 this year is differing from consensus.
And you love him.
Because I do. And that's the biggest thing. I think people think I'm like a CMC hater, but I'm not. Like, to your point, though, if you include the playoffs, Colin, he rolled up 417 touches last season. Like we can't dismiss that. And he's not 25, he's not 26 years old anymore. And the volume does eventually catch up even to the outliers, the Barry Sanders of the world, the Derrick Henrys of the world. Like the volume will eventually catch up to you. And we're not that far away from, I mean, come on, Colin, like, let's be kind of rewind here. Like, we're not that far away from a few years ago. You brought it up already. We had questions. Can Christian McCaffrey stay healthy through a full season?
Question.
So I agree with you. Like, that's why I can't put McCaffrey at RB1 because of those concerns. And I think it's full Bijan to the moon season this year. I think he gets unleashed in Zach Robinson's offense. I think we see him possibly pull a prime season Todd Gurley on us in 2024.
I watched Puka Nacua at Washington, then I watched him at BYU. I could not believe my eyes. I liked him, but he was a really nice college receiver. The fact that he came in and in camp, the reports were, oh, Matt Stafford found his favorite toy. He got a new guy. Like it started early in camp. And some of this is McVay too, because Whittingham, the Texas receiver who they took in the 6th round, is lighting up preseason. So some of this is the magic of McVay. Do you expect, as we pivot to wide receivers, God, the Puka year was like, okay, now everybody's had an off season to go, okay, Cooper's not the number one guy all the time. It's this guy. Do you expect similar numbers from him?
I do. And I love Puka so much. I was huge on him in the draft prospect process last year. I had him, I want to say pre-draft, Colin, I had Puka as my wide receiver 5 of the class, which was, I'm not going to say it was a hot take, but people definitely weren't following me on that. And then he goes out and he does this. And I'm not going to say that I saw that type of rookie year coming where he broke numerous records and things like that. But the kid can play ball. I mean, if you looked at per route numbers in college, and watched his film, it all says that. And I think he takes another step forward. Right now, he is at the top of my tier 2. I have him at wide receiver 7 right now. And
Wow.
yes, and so I'm projecting a huge year for Puka Nacua, but I mean, do we see this all the time? Not like we talk about investing and being high on second-year wide receivers. They get a year in the league and watch them go and explode in year 2. Then why aren't we doing that with the guy that just broke all the rookie records? Like, we should be immensely high on him. And this is no shade against Cup, but Cup is not the guy he was in his prime. I think he still has a really good year. But again, talking about age and injuries kind of catching up with players, I think Puka cements himself as the true wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles this year.
If you're ever injured, check out Morgan and Morgan. It's America's largest injury law firm, and they are there for you. Over 100 offices nationwide. Think about that. More than 1,000 lawyers with over $20 billion, that's a B, $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients. Things happen in life unexpectedly. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan and Morgan is really, really easy. Like, winning in the NFL is hard. We know that quarterbacking in the NFL is hard. Submitting a claim is easy. You're ever injured? Check out Morgan and Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound law from your cell phone. Morgan and Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for you to get a full and fair compensation if there's an unexpected accident in your life. And I've had a few. All right, another weapon question, Travis Kelce. So I'm going to throw a little theory at you. So Kelce last year showed his age in the regular season. Then, just like a great legendary quarterback, he rises from the ashes and has a terrific postseason. So now they go and get Worthy. They want to ramp that up. Andy Reid, who's a great play designer, in September, you're going to see Worthy a lot. They're trying to establish a number 1 receiver, which they haven't had since Tyreek Hill left. Also, Rashee Rice, I'm not sure the current suspension. He'll be back sometime early. They want to establish him after a very turbulent off-field issue. So my take is Kansas City, Brett Veach, Andy Reid, Mahomes, they're trying to establish an identity at receiver. They also know that Travis Kelce, he's going to be great when it counts. I could see Kelce's numbers dipping as they try to establish like a pack. Let's be honest, last year, they didn't have a 1. There were weeks they didn't have a 2. So they are going to use the heck out of Worthy early. This is what Andy does in September. They're going to try to reestablish Rashee Rice. Is it possible that at least early, Travis, not ignored, but is a secondary target because what they're trying to do to elevate a young receiving core?
I think it's definitely possible. And even if he doesn't fall down in the target pecking order a little bit, the other part is, do they cut his snaps a little bit? Because again, like, we're talking about it and everybody's talking about it. Can Kansas City three-peat? And if they're going to do that, Travis Kelce has to stay healthy. He has to be a big part of what they do. But the question is, do you roll him out there for 90-95% of snaps the entire season? And if he gets banged up, we saw what happened last year. So I'm with you. I mean, he's not my tight end 1 this year in fantasy. That distinction goes to Trey McBride. So I think that we do see Kelce put up good numbers, really good numbers for where I have him ranked. But him being the undisputed tight end 1, just crushing everybody in his path and stuff. And I'm not saying he's going to have a bad year, but I do think we could see him take a small step back statistically in 2024.
Now, obviously, it's speculation to some degree on rookies, but I do think this preseason, Derek, more than the previous 2, McVay started that don't play any good players in the preseason, and for a while it was like Pied Piper. All the young coaches are like, I'm not playing my starters. I think this year we've seen a lot of snaps. I mean, Caleb Williams playing an entire half. You're seeing starters playing. Pittsburgh's trying to figure out 5 series for Russell Wilson. I feel like I've gotten more meat in the sandwich in my preseason. I've seen the rookies more. Give me a couple of rookies that you would be confident saying, man, this situation is I mean, hell, last year, Green Bay, you got a Luke Musgrave, you got some of these young receivers. You're like, wow, by the end of the year. Is there a rookie or two that you'd be confident saying, consider it, he's on my radar?
I think at the top of the class, I mean, obviously I could wax poetic about Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going extremely
Yes.
high. Love him this year. And
Okay.
but that everybody knows that. I think Malik Neighbors has shown a ton in camp. And the big question I have is, can he overcome Daniel Jones and what the rest of that
That's a
offense
big
can
question.
look like?
Can
It
anybody in
is.
New York?
It is. I mean, Danny Dimes went out there and almost threw 3 picks in a preseason game. So we all have to
Yeah.
question it. But
Yeah.
I think the talent and the cream can rise to the top of Malik Neighbors. But I think the big guy that I do want to mention here, Colin, is Rome Odunze. And we all talked about him in the pre-draft process. There was a top 3 of the wide receivers, and they were electric, alpha level guys. And Rome is the guy where everybody's like, I don't know what to do with him in the Chicago passing offense, because we do have Keenan Allen. We do have DJ Moore there. But I'm old enough to remember when Jamar Chase entered the league and he was just that guy, and they had Tyler Boyd and they had T. Higgins alongside him. I'm not going to discount that Rome Odunze could possibly do that. And if him and Caleb click soon, like in the early parts of the season, he could be the guy, and maybe not Keenan Allen playing in 2 wide receiver sets, because Shane Waldron, we know, likes to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. That's going to be part of it. Maybe some 21 personnel as well. But I think Rome can crack and be part of that 12 personnel group and be playing in 2 wide. So I definitely want to be in on him. And you talked about Worthy. I think he could have a fantastic rookie season. I guess if I'm going to go down a little bit further down the board, and people are worried about him because Zach Ertz is there. But Ben Sinnott is a player that I've loved throughout the entire process, whether it was watching his film, the talent, the athleticism. And people don't have any worries, and they have no concerns about Brock Bowers playing really well as a rookie with the Raiders, even though
Yes.
Michael Mayer is there.
Yeah.
And he's younger. He's a better player at this part of his career, and that's no shade to Zach Ertz, but it's a reality. I think we could be sleeping a little bit too much on the ceiling and the involvement of Ben Sinnott, both early and throughout the entire season. Like, Colin, if I were to tell you right now, we closed our eyes and it's week 13 and Ben Sinnott is running routes, he's the full-time starter, Zach Ertz is playing on 3rd downs or just when they have 12 personnel, does that scenario sound absolutely crazy?
Yeah, no, it's funny about how situationally, Derek, things change. I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
So Kyle Pitts has been a disappointment.
Yeah.
Drake London's good. But when you consider the gap between Desmond Ridder and Kirk Cousins, okay, my thing is it Kyle Pitts or who's throwing the ball? Is it Drake London or who's throwing the ball? I look at Atlanta and I think to myself, does everybody understand by getting Judon and the safety from the Broncos, this could be a 12-win team. This is not a great division. Carolina, the Saints, I think, are the first team to fire a coach in Dennis Allen. I look at Atlanta and I think, I don't know if these are sleeper picks, but Kyle Pitts now has a nearly 68% completion percentage veteran who, by the way, Kirk is the nicest guy in the world. He's had a chip on his shoulder a mile long forever. All he does is produce. What do you make of the Atlanta skill players? Bijan, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. Now with a really, I mean, let's be honest. Kirk Cousins is every bit Dak Prescott. He just doesn't have a star on the helmet. Their numbers are virtually the same.
I'm with you. I've been touting this all off season. I've loved Drake London since he came into the league, and on a per route basis, he's been amazing in the league. It's just he's been hampered by bad quarterback play, no passing volume, Arthur Smith at times, and you could say the same for Bijan and Kyle Pitts. I'm sky high on this entire offense. Like, Bijan's my RB1 this year. I've got Drake London right now as a top 10 wide receiver 9 in my rankings. Yes.
Wow.
I think we see the coming out party for Drake London. I think he shows everybody the type of talent that we've seen. If you've watched any of his all 22, if you've been out there like at Atlanta Falcons games, everybody, the fans, they're all going to see it this year, because Drake London, he's an ascending talent. And I think with the passing volume, and Kirk Cousins was on his way. Like, I know we make all of our jokes about big time Kirk Cousins and he falls apart, but he was having a stellar season last year before the Achilles injury and stuff. I think that he plays extremely well. And this boils down to Drake London, Kyle Pitts again, because we always hear these things until we don't hear them until after the season is over, Colin, where guys are more hurt, or maybe the recovery from injuries wasn't as smooth, or maybe they were more hurt than we were led to believe. And after the Falcons season concluded, we found out, oh, well, Kyle Pitts was dealing with more of the knee injury and he was slower throughout the season and stuff. I think we see the best Kyle Pitts season we've seen to date. And I know he's got 1,000-yard season on the resume, but I think we see that plus touchdowns this year. So immensely high on that entire offense.
Okay, so I'm going to throw, first of all, I am a complete novice at this, and that's why you are great here, because I'm asking you very rudimentary questions. I do a bit called sharp or square. I'm the square. Chad Millman's the sharp. So these questions, you're probably, as I ask you these questions, these are probably the most rudimentary questions, but I'm going to throw something out at you. This to me, now, he's not a dark horse, but here's how I look at Davante Adams. They'll be trailing in almost all games, so he's going to get tons of looks. Gardner Minshew is basically Baker Mayfield. If you look statistically, college and pro, he can play. So he's going to get looks. They're going to be trailing in games. Gardner Minshew has always been a little better than anybody wants to acknowledge. He's basically Baker without the bankroll. Also, I could see Davante's been verbal when he's unhappy. This team starts 1-7. I could see Tom Telesco moving him to a contender and a star quarterback because he has been very outspoken. And I could see Tom Telesco saying, I'm the new GM. We need a quarterback. There's 1 million receivers. Let's clean the books. So I look at Davante Adams and I think there's so many elements. No team may trail other than New England more than the Raiders. I mean, you're in a division with, Bo Nix looks great. Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Harbaugh, clever offensive guys. And I think if it even goes sideways, I think he'd be somebody that they would look at and go, we can get a 1 and a 3 for this guy. And the Raiders just completely rebuild next year. What say you on that?
I'm with you on the look. I'm ready to put my tinfoil hat on right now. I'm ready to do it because I'm with you. I think there's an easy chance. We danced around the name, but I think there's an easy chance that maybe Davante's wearing white and green by the end of the year. That would not shock me at all. But the talent for Davante Adams, I think, it has not diminished. I think my only worries with Davante, and I wrote him up. He's in our draft kit right now that's live on Fantasy Pros, fantasypros.com/kit. And my only problem with Davante Adams, because I think everything you mentioned, as far as the target volume is going to be there, his skills have not diminished. If he gets traded, we're talking about Davante Adams going to be a top 5 receiver again. My only worry about him and the hesitance I have is where he goes in drafts, because fantasy-wise, he was the wide receiver 15 last year. He's being drafted inside the top 10, so it's a little bit pricey. But if he ends the season on the Jets, that price could pay off.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of the Jets, let's end it with this. And again, this is something I'm just trying to, not tinfoil hat it, but Aaron's 40 off of surgery. It's a rebuilt offensive line. Offensive lines generally being rebuilt, run blocking's easier than pass blocking. They're in a division and a conference with a lot of good pass rushers, the AFC. Okay. I could see the Jets being more run-centric with Breece Hall. Mike Williams struggling to stay healthy. People rolling coverage over on Garrett Wilson. Aaron not trusting his offensive line, being reluctant to hang into the pocket. I mean, Brady, remember when he got hurt? He wasn't comfortable for 2 years, anybody around his knees. That wasn't, so this is a more serious injury, and also Aaron's older. I could see this team throwing less. If you look at the quarterbacks, Derek, that they play in the first 9-10 weeks, it is backups, it's rookies, you don't have to win by shootouts with that Jets defense. There's going to be you start looking at it's Vikings, it's Denver, it's Tennessee. I could see the Jets running a very, very conservative offense, letting their defense lead the way. And Aaron and Garrett's numbers are not stupendous relative to their talent. What do you say?
I agree with you. And I was pulling up the regular season, like the early part of the schedule. Like they get the 49ers, Titans, Patriots, Broncos, Vikings.
Look at those
I mean,
quarterbacks.
yeah, I mean, seriously, after the 49ers, what are we talking about here? Like, they should devour Will Levis. We're going to have either Jacoby Brissett probably under center. You got a rookie in Bo Nix. You got Sam Darnold. I mean, again, yes, lots of positive game script, lots of probably feeding Brees. And I'm with you. I think that their passing game numbers could disappoint in those early games, especially also if we, and this goes back years, even to the Green Bay days, where Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers run an incredibly slow as molasses offense. They're always near the bottom in play volume and passing rate. They just are. So if they slow it down and just say, okay, well, we're going to protect Aaron. We're playing a full season. We want to be sniffing the playoffs. We want to keep him upright because we know what it looks like if he's not. So we just lean on the defense. We lean on Brees. I don't disagree with you at all. But again, this is another reason to love Brees Hall in the first round of drafts.
How about that? That's 35 minutes with a complete novice. And I'm throwing out my tinfoil hat stuff. And most of it's reasonably sane. I love that you're in on Drake London and Kyle Pitts because I think sometimes we forget just how dire the passing offense was. I mean, Arthur Smith turned around Ryan Tannehill. He just waved a white flag last year. He just gave up.
He did. He did. He said, look, I've done enough, or I've done all I can. Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, y'all are just not it. Like, I don't know what else to do with these guys.
So, well, Derek, this is a pleasure for me. Fantasy Pros, for those who are unfamiliar, and if you play fantasy football, you are familiar. You guys do such a tremendous job. You're so prepared. You go a mile deep. It's such a great service for your listeners. I mean, your draft stuff's amazing. I mean, we have so much respect for you guys, and you just over-delivered on everything, and I appreciate you tolerating my 35 minutes of novice questions.
I love good football talk, Colin. This was fantastic, man. And yes, all the things and stuff at Fantasy Pros, I think we have the best tools in the industry and the best mock draft simulators. So people getting reps over there, reading the content, it's all the things, man. So I love this. Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
All right. Thanks, man.